The consequences of the conflict in the Middle East are still difficult to precisely predict. It seems to me that those involved in the conflict cannot predict anything.
Russia has just done something that will make the US-Iran nuclear standoff significantly harder to resolve. In the span of a week, Moscow called the Strait of Hormuz Iran's tested nuclear weapon, declared Iran's uranium enrichment an inalienable right that neither China nor Russia can accept being stripped away, and put a standing offer on the table to take Iran's enriched uranium stockpile itself. Each of those moves lands directly against Washington's core demands, and none of them are accidental. The most striking statement came from Dmitry Medvedev, the deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council and the country's former president. He posted on X just hours after the US-Iran ceasefire was announced on April 8th. The ceasefire itself had been framed by Trump as a victory.
Look, regardless, we win. Regardless what happens, we win. We totally defeated that country. And so let's see what happens. Maybe they make a deal, maybe they don't.
With Iran agreeing to reopen the Strait of Hormuz in exchange for a pause in bombing, Medvedev's read of that outcome was the opposite. He wrote that it was not clear how the truce would play out, but that one thing was certain. Iran had tested its nuclear weapons, he said. It is called the Strait of Hormuz. Its potential is inexhaustible. He was not talking about a physical bomb. He was making the argument that Iran had demonstrated something more durable than a warhead. A chokehold over the global economy that cannot be bombed away, surrendered, or negotiated out of existence. The message was directed as much at Washington as it was at Tehran. Russia was telling the US that it had just accepted a ceasefire with a country that had found a weapon America cannot match. That framing is worth sitting with. The entire basis of the US military campaign against Iran was the threat of its nuclear program. Trump repeatedly told the public and Iran alike that there would be no enrichment of uranium, that the US would dig up and remove Iran's nuclear stockpile, that a nuclear-armed Iran was simply not going to happen on his watch.
You'll be very happy. The USA will get all nuclear dust. You know what the nuclear dust is? That was that white powdery substance created by our B-2 bombers, those great B-2 bombers, late one evening.
And then, while those threats were still being issued, Iran closed one waterway and brought the global oil market to the worst energy shock since the 1970s. Brent crude passed $119 a barrel. Gulf states burned through interceptor missiles faster than they could be replaced. The US was forced to ease sanctions on Russian oil exports to keep markets from fully collapsing. Medvedev's point was not subtle. Iran did not need a nuclear warhead to force a superpower to the negotiating table. It needed Hormuz. The second Russia intervention came directly from Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, speaking at a press conference in Beijing on April 15th after meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Lavrov said plainly that uranium enrichment is an inalienable right of the Islamic Republic of Iran, the same right that belongs to any other state. He said Russia would accept any decision that satisfies the Iranian side within the framework of its legitimate rights. He added that neither China nor Russia, nor the majority of countries throughout the world, can accept Washington's demand for zero enrichment. And he pointed out that the International Atomic Energy Agency has never concluded that Iran's uranium enrichment had military purposes, positioning Russia as aligned with the IAEA's own findings against the US position. Those remarks land directly on the central sticking point that collapsed the Islamabad talks. J.D. Vance said after 21 hours of negotiations that the core issue was a fundamental commitment from Iran not to pursue a nuclear weapon. The US wanted Iran's roughly 440 kilograms of highly enriched uranium removed from the country. Iran refused. US officials then proposed a 20-year moratorium on enrichment. Iran countered with 5 years. Trump said 20 years was not even long enough. The gap was not closable in a single day, and Vance left. What Lavrov did by standing in Beijing and declaring Iran's enrichment an inalienable right was signal publicly that Russia will not support any framework that strips Tehran of that capability, no matter what pressure Washington applies. The third Russian move was quieter, but in some ways, the most consequential. The Kremlin confirmed through spokesman Dmitry Peskov that Russia's offer to take custody of Iran's enriched uranium remains open. This is not a new idea. Putin had raised it in conversations with both US officials and regional leaders. The logic is that if the central US demand is getting the enriched uranium out of Iran, Russia could physically hold it under IAEA supervision, satisfying one aspect of the American position while preserving Iran's right to claim it was not forced to dismantle its program. The US had apparently rejected the proposal in earlier contacts. Peskov confirmed that rejection but said the offer stood. Iran had reportedly floated the idea itself before the war began, indicating Tehran might consider it under the right conditions. Trump said separately that he would not accept a 20-year moratorium and that enrichment must stop entirely, which would seem to rule out any arrangement that leaves Iran's existing stockpile intact under foreign custody. But the fact that Russia is publicly keeping the option alive serves a purpose regardless of whether it is ever accepted. It positions Moscow as a constructive mediator while simultaneously ensuring that any deal has to pass through Russia's preferences before it can be finalized. Lavrov went further in Beijing than just the nuclear issue. He addressed Hormuz directly, saying that Iran's blockade of the strait was a direct consequence of the aggression from the United States and Israel, and that Persian Gulf countries privately acknowledge they cannot object to the thesis that Iran would not have taken those steps without being attacked. He also told reporters that Russia is ready to supply energy to China and other nations affected by the crisis, which is not a statement of altruism. Russia has benefited from every day Hormuz has stayed effectively closed. Oil prices rising 50% since the war began has filled Russian coffers with the revenue that funds its ongoing war in Ukraine. The US was forced to temporarily ease sanctions on Russian oil exports to ease the energy shock. Moscow was financially better off with the strait closed, and Lavrov's willingness to offer Russian energy as an alternative to Gulf supply underscores that Russia has no urgent interest in seeing Hormuz reopen on American terms. What Russia has done across these three statements, from Medvedev's nuclear weapon framing, to Lavrov's enrichment defense, to the uranium custody offer, is build a coherent diplomatic architecture around Iran's position. It reframes Iran's Hormuz leverage as a strategic success rather than a desperate act. It blocks international consensus on the nuclear demand by placing China and Russia publicly on the other side of it. And it keeps a back channel open, the uranium custody proposal, that gives Iran a potential off-ramp without capitulation, while requiring any deal to run through Moscow. The US walked out of Islamabad saying the ball was in Iran's court. Russia's message this week is that it has just made the court considerably larger.
I will say the war in Iran is going along swimmingly. We can do whatever we want. And it should be ending pretty soon. It was perfect. I mean, it's perfect. It was the power we have, our military. We have the most powerful military anywhere in the world. I built it 4 years, my first 4 years. We had the best economy in the history of our country in my first term, and we're blowing it out now. We're blowing it away now. And despite our little diversion to the lovely country of Iran, lovely place, but we had to do that because otherwise bad things could happen, really bad things. So we've sent out, and I think you're going to see some incredible results, you know, for those people that question it. You're going to see some, the job we've done has been amazing. The ships are out there today and they're saying, don't come here, don't even think about it. And you have these massive tankers saying, let's get the hell out of here. It's amazing.